After the presentation, we will have time for question and answer. You can use the chat feature for that. Our presenter today is Marc Goedecke, who heads the MDSAP program at DQS MED. And Marc, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you. So, warm welcome to this short introduction to MDSAP. Good morning or good evening, depending where you are on the planet, because I just saw in the chat that we have some people from South America as well. From South Africa. Okay, so we'll start right away. A few words about me. My name is Marc Goedecke. I have a background in biology. I majored in medical microbiology, molecular biology, and biochemistry. I have been with the DQS group of companies since 2014 and with DQS Medizinprodukte GmbH since December 2017. My profile at DQS MED currently is that of product manager MDSAP, which is the reason why I'm here right now. I'm also a product manager for ISO 13485 under SCC accreditation. I'm also an auditor and a regulatory affairs manager. So, what is MDSAP? MDSAP stands for Medical Device Single Audit Program. And this is a program that allows the conduct of a single regulatory audit of a medical device quality management system to satisfy the requirements of multiple regulatory jurisdictions. This means that this is not a program to register medical devices. It is just directed towards the recognition of requirements with regards to the quality management. Audits are conducted by auditing organizations such as DQS Medizinprodukte GmbH, auditing organizations authorized by the participating regulatory authorities to audit under MDSAP requirements. And the most important question, why should you go for MDSAP certification? And the main advantage, although we will go into this in more detail later on, is that only one audit, MDSAP audit, is sufficient to show compliance with the standard and regulatory requirements of up to 5 different medical device markets, which are shown here, which are Australia, Brazil, Canada, Japan, and the United States. So let's start with a little bit of history. We go back to 2012. At that time, we had the working group MDSAP within the International Medical Device Regulators Forum with the objective of generating a global approach to auditing and monitoring of manufacturing of medical devices to ensure safe medical devices. In 2012, we have a first statement of cooperation that is with the countries Australia, or I should say with the regulatory authorities from Australia, Canada, Brazil, and the United States of America. In 2014, or between 2014 and 2016, the MDSAP pilot program started, and within this period, in 2015, Japan became another participating regulatory authority, which is shown here. In 2015, Health Canada announced the discontinuation of Camdicas. In 2016, we had a revision of the model to the new version, to the then new version of the 13485, which is of course the version 13485 2016. And in 2017, we had the start of the full implementation phase. So why was the MDSAP program developed? From regulatory side, on the side of the regulatory authorities, MDSAP was developed to enable appropriate regulatory oversight of medical device manufacturers' quality management systems, while at the same time minimizing regulatory burden on industry. It was developed to promote a more efficient and flexible use of regulatory resources through work sharing and mutual acceptance among regulators, while respecting the sovereignty of each authority. So we have currently 5 regulatory authorities cooperating with each other to enable the functioning of the MDSAP program. We have also on a global scale the will to promote in the longer term a greater alignment of regulatory approaches and technical requirements based on international standards and best practices. And finally, it was developed to promote consistency, predictability, and transparency of regulatory programs by standardizing. So this slide is showing you the involved players and the ways in which they interact. So on top, we have the regulatory authorities who recognize auditing organizations such as DQS Medizinprodukte GmbH to conduct MDSAP audits. So in that sense, regulatory authorities are responsible for the assignment and recognition of auditing organizations, and at the same time, the auditing organization will make available the deliverables from MDSAP audits in the form of audit reports and audit documentation via a dedicated database, which is called the REPS database. Auditing organizations, of course, audit and certify medical device manufacturers, who then may seek market approval for their products from those countries that participate in the program, making use of MDSAP certificates or in certain cases making use of the MDSAP audit report. And regulatory authorities, of course, are responsible for granting market approval to medical device manufacturers. But there is more to MDSAP than the 3 jurisdictions that I've shown before. We have more authorities involved in the program. More specifically, we have affiliate members. These are regulatory authorities that show interest in MDSAP and which to engage in MDSAP and utilize MDSAP audit reports for evaluating medical device manufacturers' quality system. And currently, the affiliate members are Argentina's National Administration of Drugs, Foods, and Medical Devices, the Republic of Korea's Ministry of Food and Drug Safety, and Singapore's Health Sciences Authority. So which means that if a manufacturer is exporting into these countries where these jurisdictions work, where these regulatory authorities work, these authorities will also have access to MDSAP deliverables in order to evaluate this manufacturer. But they're not only affiliate members, we also have observers, and these are regulatory authorities that also show interest in the program and which to engage in the program, but that do not make use of deliverables like the MDSAP report and the non-conformity rating and exchange forms. And the current members that act as observers are the European Union, the pre-qualification of in vitro diagnostics program from the World Health Organization, and the MHRA, the United Kingdom's Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency. So just to give you a few numbers, this is showing you the number of sites in the total number of sites in light blue, the development over the years, and in darker blue, the number of sites added year per year. As you can see, we had a certain slowdown in the last years, and this is my personal opinion. I think this is due to the corona pandemic, which has kind of slowed things down, but we of course expect the program to gain wider acceptance and to have significant growth in the coming years. This, I should say, are the total numbers, of course. This is not specific to DQS Medizinprodukte GmbH. And on the next slide, we have the MDSAP sites per country. And you can see this is from November of last year that the United States is the first country with 42%, followed by Germany, Canada, China, Japan, United Kingdom, and so on and so forth. So it's fair to say it's been implemented worldwide, with the United States in a leading position, I should say. So let's give you some details on the MDSAP audit model, and I'm going to go into this in some depth in the next slides. So we're talking about the 3-year audit cycle. We have a top-down approach. What is meant by this will be shown in the next few slides. An established audit sequence. This is all going into the direction of standardization. It's based on ISO 13485, so it's based on 13485, adding the regulatory requirements for the relevant jurisdictions. The calculation of audit duration is based on the accomplishment of tasks. So the total number of tasks is the factor that decides on the duration of the audit. And again, I will explain this in some depth in the following slides. We have a site-specific audit report. Usually it will be one report per site, but we have exceptions that are possible according to a campus concept. So if 2 sites are very close nearby and a few factors given, then we can apply this campus scheme, and then we will generate one report for this campus site. So this is showing you a scheme of the certification cycle, starting with initial audit, where all requirements will be, all relevant requirements, I should say, will be audited, followed by 2 surveillance audits, where a part of the requirements will be audited in order to ensure that the certificate can be upheld, followed by a recertification after 3 years, where again all requirements will be audited. So the initial audit will always start with the stage 1, which can be conducted on site, but it doesn't have to be necessarily, and the stage 2 audit, which should be in any case conducted on site. Usually surveillance audits are not preceded by a stage 1 audit, but if this is required because of a high number of non-conformities or other issues with the manufacturer, we may schedule a stage 1 before a surveillance audit. But usually it will be there will be no stage 1 required, and during the surveillance audits, we will audit, or the organization will audit, changes in also management, new market approvals, the measurement analysis and improvement process, vigilance, etc., etc. And then finally, for recertification, here again, we can schedule a stage 1 audit, but this will be done only if required. And then we will go for the full audit of the MDSAP requirements. All of this is comprehensively described by the MDSAP Audit Program and contained within. And then we also have room for special audits or unannounced audits. Special audits, just like in other programs, we would have if, for example, a new site is added, or if the scope is to be extended, or if we have any significant change within the quality management system that needs to be audited. And unannounced audits are, I must say, seldom in the case of MDSAP, but they have to be conducted if we have a high number of non-conformities, or it could be that the regulatory authority requests the auditing organization to conduct such an unannounced audit. So in a regular cycle, you should have surveillance first, second, and recertification, but we also have the possibility to conduct special audits, and in some cases, unannounced audits may be necessary. And now I would like to introduce you to the MDSAP sequence. This is very specific to MDSAP. And this audit sequence is formed by 7 processes which are displayed here. And in fact, this audit sequence, with the exception of a few exceptions, should be conducted in sequence. So we always, at an MDSAP audit, start with audit of the management process, followed by the device marketing authorization and facility registration process, followed by the measurement analysis and improvement process, etc., through to the purchasing process towards the end. However, these processes are not considered to be isolated within themselves, but they have links towards each other, which are shown on this slide. And it could be said that while auditing the first process, management, the auditors are already supposed to collect some clues and some hints towards the later processes with respect to which sample processes, which sample files, for example, design and development, or later sample production processes they're going to review during, for example, design and development or production and service controls. And as I mentioned before, the audit duration is calculated according to the number of tasks that have to be audited. So you can see, for example, for management, we have 11 tasks. And if you look at production and service controls, we have 29 tasks. And depending on whether the company uses sterilization techniques, if it has high-risk products or not, if there are implants or not, and also on the amount of jurisdictions that are part of the program, we have more or less tasks, and as a consequence, we have a higher or lower audit duration. So again, the question, now seriously, why should I implement MDSAP and what are the benefits? So again, it's one single audit instead of multiple separate audits or inspections by participating regulatory authorities. Because of the fact that the manufacturer has to conduct only one audit, we have an optimization of time and resources expended on audit activities. And because of the standardization that we have in MDSAP, and this is not only because we are using 13485, but also because of audit templates for report generation and for the reporting of non-conformity forms, we have a higher predictability of results because of the use of the MDSAP audit model. In the long term, it's a goal, and you've already seen that there are already more MDSAP affiliate members, and we expect the number of affiliate members to grow in the future. So we expect that additional regional authorities will be taking part in the program, implying that we will have an even broader applicability of the MDSAP audit results. So finally, I will just give you a brief glimpse on the benefits specific to each jurisdiction. In the case of Australia, MDSAP audit reports are considered as material input in the evaluation and granting or maintaining marketing authorization. So it's an add-on to the other documents that need to be submitted for medical device registration. Although I should say that certain medical devices are excluded from the program, and in that sense would be exempt. In the case of Brazil, the MDSAP audit report and the MDSAP audit results in general are used as an important input for pre-market and post-market assessments that are conducted by Anvisa. In the case of Health Canada, MDSAP is recognized as the only means by which manufacturers of class 2, 3, and 4 medical devices can demonstrate compliance with Canadian market regulatory requirements. In the case of Japan, both the Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare and the Pharmaceuticals and Medical Devices Agency use MDSAP audit reports as part of pre- and post-market assessment, with the benefits shown here, that is namely the exemption of a manufacturing site from on-site inspection, and or the substitution of a significant portion of the required documentation as part of the Japanese representative and marketing authorization holder inspection. And finally, for the United States of America, the FDA recognizes MDSAP audit reports as a substitute for its own routine inspections. And I should say only routine inspections, inspections for cause or compliance follow-up inspections will not be replaced by MDSAP audit reports. If you are interested in the program and you would like to look for more information, you should check the MDSAP homepage. If you Google it and you type in MDSAP FDA, you should immediately be guided to this site. However, I've included the link in this presentation. This site contains announcement, and it contains a range of official documents and also links to the relevant international regulations. There's a very important document on this site, which is the MDSAP audit approach. This is not really a document for manufacturers. However, it's very useful because it could be said it's like the MDSAP Bible. It contains all the details of the MDSAP audit program. It contains the MDSAP processes and the MDSAP tasks. It very comprehensively contains all the requirements that need to be implemented in order for an MDSAP certificate to be granted. But it's not a document directed to manufacturers, so it's not like a manufacturer can use this document as reference for the implementation of the requirement. The manufacturer always has to refer to the documents from the international jurisdiction, so from Australia, Brazil, Canada, Japan, or the US, and or the US. So this was a very brief introduction into MDSAP. Please let me know. Well, take some time to visit our website at DQS Global, and I'm open for questions and discussion if you are interested. Thank you very much.
Okay, it looks like we do have one question in the, oh, we have a few questions. The first is, what would the advantage of MDSAP versus ISO 13485-2016?
Yes, MDSAP is actually based on 13485, and the MDSAP certificates we grant at DQS Medizinprodukte GmbH display ISO 13485-2016. So in a sense, it's an ISO 13485-2016 certificate with additional value, so to speak. So ISO 13485 is obviously widely recognized, and it's a requirement by some customers of manufacturers and by some jurisdictions. MDSAP has the additional advantage on top that it's recognized by the participating regulatory authorities, and it will aid those manufacturers who have this certificate to register their product at these jurisdictions. So I would consider MDSAP to be an add-on to 13485. I hope that that makes sense to you.
Okay, great. We have our next question is MDSAP required if we are not a medical device company, but we are certified to ISO 13485?
MDSAP is only really required as in mandatory if you are exporting to Canada. Other than that, it's an optional program. It should be said, however, that if you decide to implement MDSAP, you have to implement it for all jurisdictions where you are exporting your devices into. So if you are exporting into the US and Brazil, you cannot choose to do MDSAP only for the US. If you implement MDSAP, it has to be for the USA and for Brazil.
Okay. How long is a typical MDSAP audit in terms of days?
So initial certification is depending on the amount of jurisdictions, approximately 7 days in total, which would be 1.5 to 2 man days for stage 1 and the remaining time for stage 2. And then if we go into the surveillance audits, it would typically be between 3.5 man days and 4 man days. It also depends on the amount of non-conformities detected in the previous audit, but this is roughly the time needed.
Will MDSAP replace FDA 21 CFR 820?
No, I don't expect that. In fact, FDA 21 CFR 820 is part of the MDSAP requirements. So if you look at the MDSAP task in the MDSAP audit approach, one task could be, for example, within the management process, that the company needs to designate a management representative that has a number of functions, just like in ISO 13485. Then you will get a reference to all the requirements that demand this within 13485 and also the country-specific requirements. So 21 CFR 820 is one of the documents that feeds into MDSAP, and its requirements, insofar as they are not covered by 13485, are specifically also part of the MDSAP program.
Okay. We need to choose a registrar that could perform the MDSAP audit process, correct?
Actually, I'm not familiar with the term registrar. What does this mean exactly?
That's like a certification body. So that would be us in this instance, I believe.
Yes, so the MDSAP term is AO, it's the auditing organization. And you are free to choose which auditing organization you want to use for MDSAP certification. But of course, we would hope that we hope that you go for DQS certification.
Okay, who will be lead or special audit? Notified body or authority?
In most cases, it will be the auditing organization. So in this question, I think that is what meant by notified body. But we as an auditing organization may have had a request from the regulatory authorities to conduct this audit. But in this MDSAP model, the special audit will always be conducted by auditing organization. But this doesn't mean that the regulatory authorities do not conduct special audits by their own initiative.
Okay, this next question, how does this compare to Metacried that I am hearing about?
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with Metacried. I'm sorry.
Let's see this next one. Regarding Canada, are Class 1 products also required to meet MDSAP requirements? And if not, can a Class 1 product be sold in Canada?
Actually, no, Class 1 products are not part of the MDSAP program. And I'm afraid I cannot tell you about the specifics for registering Class 1 products in Canada. What I can say for sure, but I mean, this is hardly a surprise, is that the requirements for Class 1 products are lower than for all other types of products.
Can you confirm that if you have ISO 13485-2016 and a Class 2A device, MDSAP is also required to market in Canada?
Yes, but Class 2A device does not correspond to the Canadian classification. So what you first have to check is what is the classification of your product according to Canadian rules. And if your product is Class 2 or higher, meaning Class 2, Class 3, or Class 4, then you require MDSAP to marketing.
Will site registration to MDSAP in the USA replace site registration to FDA site registration?
I'm afraid not. I know that FDA site registration is fairly expensive, and no, this is a requirement that will not be replaced by MDSAP, as far as I know.
Okay. Is there a plan to adopt MDSAP in the UK?
Well, we have the MHRA as affiliate member within the MDSAP regulatory authorities, and this could be a possibility. What I know about the MHRA is that they're setting up their program, and they have a part of their program is dedicated to the recognition of other certification programs. So maybe they would recognize devices that have been registered in Europe under the MDR, for example, and possibly they will also recognize MDSAP results up to some extent. But I can't say at this point if UK will be one of those jurisdictions joining the others like the USA or Canada or Japan at this point. Currently, they're only observers.
Okay. Can a manufacturing company add MDSAP logo to the packaging of its medical device product?
No, I don't think this is enough.
Okay. FDA published draft for new 21 CFR Part 820. Do we know how it will affect MDSAP?
Well, whenever there's an update of regulatory documents from the regulatory authorities that participate, this is included in the MDSAP audit approach. For example, in the case of Canada, we had new rules for the reporting of adverse events, and also Canada introduced a special type of report per device that would allow for an adjustment of the risk analysis. And these things are first published within the documents of the relevant jurisdictions and are then transposed to the MDSAP audit approach. So if there's a draft for a new 21 CFR Part 820, I expect that with some time and delay, the requirements will be included in the MDSAP program via the MDSAP audit approach.
Okay, if we do MDSAP through DQS, does it replace the regular ISO 13485 audits?
Yes, in the sense that if you conduct an MDSAP audit, you can get two certificates out of it, which would be the MDSAP certificate and the 13485 certificate. However, we need to generate two reports. So we will generate one MDSAP report, and we will generate a report for 13485. And another question we often get is, can manufacturers replace the 13485 certificate with an MDSAP certificate? Because the MDSAP certificate also references 13485 to 2016 on the certificate itself. And the answer is that in theory, you can replace it, but we don't know if every instance that uses or that requires a 13485 certificate will accept it. So I know that in some jurisdictions it's required to have a 13485 certificate to export to that jurisdiction or to market in that jurisdiction. And if for some reason they don't accept MDSAP because they think the certificate is somehow strange and it doesn't suit their requirements, then obviously MDSAP will not be sufficient. So in theory, MDSAP certificate contains 13485 and on top regulatory requirements from the participating jurisdictions, and therefore should be a 13485 certificate by itself, but we cannot exclude the risk that in some instances it may not be recognized. So we would recommend to uphold both, even if they overlap to a great extent.
Okay, our next question. Can DQSUS perform MDSAP audit for sites in the US?
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that DQSUS can, through its cooperation with DQS Medizinprodukte GmbH, conduct MDSAP audits. So the entity issuing the certificate would be DQS Medizinprodukte GmbH in Germany. However, we have dedicated auditors in the US who can do the MDSAP audits, or we can send auditors from Germany as well.
Yes, Scott, I don't know, I believe you're on, if you wanted to elaborate on that at all.
Yeah, Marc is correct. The paperwork initially go through DQS Inc, which would be me. I'm the sector sales manager for medical, and I partner with the guys over at DQS MED. We work all the calculations out, and I actually issue the quotation back to the customer in the United States. Marc is also correct. We have MDSAP auditors located domestically, and sometimes we could bring them over from Germany. It just depends on the codes and the situation, and we always try and do what's best for the customer. So short answer long is yeah, we can.
Okay. Will MDSAP requirements include 100% of the requirements of FDA 21 CFR 820?
That's what I believe, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then someone just said, we have been told that DQS was not one of the registrars chosen to perform MDSAP in the USA. Scott?
Yeah, we do it all day long.
Yeah, that's the thing. We have already a big number of customers in the US, and it's part of the daily business, so I cannot confirm.
And that was actually our last question. If anyone has any other questions, please go ahead and submit it. Otherwise, Marc, thank you for your time on this. Scott, thank you. Is there anything else any of you wanted to add?
Yeah, Sarah, this is Scott. Actually, I do have a question for Marc, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Yeah, Marc, thanks for doing this. I appreciate it. It was very helpful, very to the point. It was nice and clean. But my question to you is, one of the first slides you showed, it said a possible stage one could be done during the surveillance and the recertifications, and you mentioned the parameters of why that might happen. My question is, how do you know that's going to happen? Is the customer supposed to send possible changes to us or to DQS MED informing us of the reasons there may be a stage one or during the surveillance or how do you know that's going to happen?
Okay, so the reason to conduct the stage one in the first place before the initial audit is to ensure that the management system is ready for MDSAP certification. So in the subsequent audits, surveillance 1, 2, etc., if we were to be in doubt about the quality of the management system, we would schedule a stage one audit. So let's say we had the initial audit and we have 10 major non-conformities and 20 minor non-conformities. Then that would certainly be a reason to schedule another stage one before the surveillance audit, because we just want to make sure before we go into surveillance that non-conformities have been closed and that the system is up and running properly. So we would schedule the stage one only if we are in doubt about how good the quality management system is. And I must say that the MDSAP audit model gives us this possibility, but in my time in DQS MED, I haven't seen it used yet.
Yeah, I agree with you. I haven't seen that either. As a matter of fact, I wasn't even aware that that was a possibility. So again, the way you explained it is the customer, God forbid, they didn't do too well on one of their audits. They pretty know up front right then and there that next audit cycle, they're probably going to get hit with a stage 1.
Yes. Yeah. I would even say that the additional stage 1, which is planned and scheduled with the customer, is a way of giving a bit more security to the customer.
It probably just makes sure that they will pass their surveillance or their research by doing that stage 1 up front.
Exactly, because if we have, at the behest of regulatory authorities, we have to control anything, we would go for an unannounced audit.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
that would be the way to check if there's some, let's say, doubt and maybe even danger of non-conforming products being placed on the market, then we would always go for unannounced audits. The stage 1 is just a way to ensure that the following surveillance 1, 2, or recertification can go according to plan.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Like you, I have not come across that in all the time I've been doing MDSAP. And again, I wasn't aware of it, but what you're saying makes sense. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. Did we have more questions on the chat?
Nope, that was our last question. So thank you for your time, and thank you everyone for attending.
Yeah, so thank you very much for having me and for your interest, and have a nice remaining day in the US or wherever you are in the world.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.